So we are starting our talk on how we can perceive the Bible in a way that removes the seeming contradiction between its stories and the modern science. But I'll say at once that I'm not going to ground the modern science on the Bible. Scientific theories can change, and the longing to cram one of them into the Bible can end up in the same kind of crash as the biblical literalism, because tomorrow scientists can announce a new discovery that radically changes all their theories. So no, we won't do that. We will talk about a completely different thing, which is called the Worldview Approach. I will explain in detail what it is and why it is called that. But first, we'll have to talk on some other topics, because it turns out that a lot of people have no understanding of them at all, and they are essential to our approach. Those topics are related to studies of literature. In the age when merely looking into a long read with lots of letters has become a once-in-a-lifetime feat for many, such topics, if we want to make the information clear to the audience, have to be spelled out virtually from scratch. The thing is that the Holy Scriptures are a text. Any text, including a sacred one, can't be meant for everyone equally. There is always a group it is oriented towards in the first place. Moreover, any text we read, whether it is sacred or profane, requires a conclusion about what kind of text it is. I have once been into an Egyptian pyramid, the pyramid of Khafre, or Khafren, if you prefer Greek style. And there was an inscription inside, right above the sarcophagus. It was wall-wide and read something like, "Kilroy was here, but in the Italian language. That sepulchre had been opened by a Belzoni, Signor Belzoni, in the year 1818. Such a text. I wonder who allowed that Signor Belzoni to write texts like that in the pyramid. Most likely nobody. But it is there, and we need to find out what it is. Had it been designed that way? If not, why did he write that? Did he have a commission to do that? What did he want to put across, and who did he want to reach? Why, that's also a text, though a simplest one. Why did a Kilroy put it on a monument that he was there? What did he want to say? So it's the same with any text. It doesn't just exist. It exists for somebody. What I'm now telling you is also a text, but an oral one. I have prepared it for you, but in part I'm creating it right on the spot because I didn't learn it by heart. My talk also exists for somebody, for you. And I mind the audience I'm talking to, the fact that you know something from the Holy Scripture and not just that. I'll be adapting my speech to how I picture my audience now. When I talk to people in different languages, I also adapt the way I present things. When talking to Russians, I won't use English idioms. I wouldn't have used that phrase, Kilroy was there. They wouldn't know who Kilroy is. Actually, we don't know that either. When talking to English speakers, I won't refer to facts from the Russian culture and history. So it is with the author of any literary work, a document or an entertaining book. They adapt to their target audience. A text never exists by itself. True, it is sometimes written just for the author, kind of an aide-memoir. But then it is written in a manner different from the one that would be used if it was written for a reading audience. And that's unavoidable. That's the way any literary work is made up, whether oral or written. That's why when we read in the Bible, whatever we read there, we should consider not just what is written, but also who it was written for. We should have a clear understanding that there were people who that text was meant for. But there pops up a problem. Nothing can be said or written in a manner that would make it clear to all at once. At least because it will be written and said in quite a definite human language. But languages differ. And that's why it's stupid to take offense at I don't understand that. Because yes, there are lots of texts in the world that have been composed in a language other than English, even in the present day world. That's quite a simple idea, but it doesn't even strike some people's minds. They think that all the biblical texts were written for them personally, in the English language, and in the modern one at that. But they weren't. They were written for people who lived 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, at latest 2,000 years ago. It was the New Testament. That's why the authors minded the audience that was listening to them or reading them immediately, not us. If we want to understand what those people were supposed to understand, we should try to become like them, to find out what they had in their heads. And we should remember that those were people living in quite a certain time and in quite a certain place. It isn't just place and time that we should mind, but also age sometimes. Because one thing is what kids are told at nursery, and quite a different one, what is told at university. The difference can be really stark. There is such a thing as pedagogical deceit. As for me, by trade, I'm a teacher of the English language. You may have guessed by now that English isn't my mother tongue though. I learned it at school. So for me, the deceit was that when I was in the 4th year of school, and that was the first year we had English, I was told that English has certain reading rules, and we used to learn them long and hard. When I grew up and became a teacher myself, I realized there are no reading rules in English. Those alleged rules were just conventions needed to create a kind of order in children's minds somehow. And it's that way with lots of things. We have one sort of maths at primary school and quite a different one at high school. We can give plenty of such examples. Everything is simplified. In many areas, kids get deceived to make it all easier for them. Let me give you another example from the life of a friend of mine who has 8 children. Once he told how he had explained to the kids that they mustn't poke their fingers into a socket. He said that there was a zap living there. Because you can't explain to a 3-year-old child about electricity, charges, tension. They are meaningless to kids. Zap is clear, but tension isn't. And neither is current strength. Can we say that man deceived his kids? No, actually he didn't. Zap does live there. A different thing is that zap has a very specific nature. And afterwards, of course, they would learn there is quite a different reality hiding behind zap. But at that moment, it was the only way to put it across to a child that he mustn't poke his fingers into a socket. Pedagogical deceit. Let's memorize that phrase. It isn't a lie. It's a way to help children understand the truth. It's a way to teach. It is unavoidable. I will give another example. Tell me how you can explain what snow is to people who have never seen any, and ice too. I'm talking about people living in the tropical zone and making no use of TV. Natives of South America or African pygmies. There was an astounding case. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to recall the names and dates. I read about that as a child. I was about 12 years old at the time. But the story had it that two Czech travelers got into a tribe in that zone and tried to tell them that it can be so cold in their homeland that water turns into something solid, which is called ice. But what's the word for ice in their language? There isn't any. And besides, water falls down from the sky as white flakes, and that is called snow. But what's the word for snow in their language? There is none. That's why it was being described in a roundabout way. But in the end, the locals didn't believe them because there is no way in the world those things could be true. Moreover, as the tribe had a strong conviction that people should always tell the truth, they just wanted to kill the guests for such a malicious and brazen lie. They were only saved by photos that they happened to have on them of the same place in Prague in winter and in summer. So they showed them, see? Then the locals started believing that such things can really be. What this proves is that people are often incapable of taking in information which is in discrepancy with the ideas they are accustomed to. And if you tell them that, the result may not be understanding. It can result in even stark rejection. They can reject not information alone, but the informant as well. I realize that what I'm going to tell may be in stark contradiction to the way of looking at things you are used to. That's why here we need to arm ourselves with a bit of patience and try to understand a different point of view. I had trouble doing that at one point of my life too. Anyway, talking about texts, we should proceed from the fact that they were written for somebody in a certain language. What we read now is translation at best. That may seem weird to someone, but all we now read at church, King James, New International, and all the other various English versions are translations. Those are attempts to render in the modern English language what the original read in ancient Hebrew, at latest 2000 years ago, although that was actually ancient Greek already. No matter. It is still true for that too. And the translator had to find the suitable words to render that. And here we run against a problem that is clear to any translator, but can be unclear to people who aren't into linguistics. And next time we'll see what kind of problem that is.